Great stories. Mine is really simple, but I think it's something to learn because smaller companies are not bound by a lot of the rules and regulations of different states. Where states, if you have 50 or more, or is it 100 or more these days, you have to announce that there'll be some layoffs that are imminent and to give people a chance to respond accordingly. Not so with small companies that are less than 50. In my case, it was less than 30 at the particular time, but uh, business was really good at the time. And um, there were positions that were popping up, some of everywhere, needs. And my boss wanted me to take on a need. We had a great relationship, but I was working another job. I was actually working two jobs at the time. I was working one job during the weekday and then this job during the weekends. And he wanted me to take a bigger role. But for him to work it, being in a smaller company, he had to either I take it or I get laid off. And sure enough, I got the layoff because I wasn't letting go of the full time job at that time. So a few months went by, and I have to kind of finish it because really, I didn't see the layoff. To keep with the themes that you guys have put forth, I didn't see it coming. I saw the growth. I saw the sales. I kind of knew what was going on that way. I was really close with my coworkers. I knew them well, not just because I worked with them, but some of them I was friends with and actually referred to get the job as it worked out. So we were all really tight. So it wasn't really the emotional aspect of it that I already had a full time and I was lost a part time job. I was cool with that. I have a little bit more time with my kids who were really small at the time. So that was, for the fact. But the job that I took full time because there was some political fallout, not due to my performance, but because I knew some things that the regular person in the company didn't know. I was let go from that job. And so that same afternoon, I remember getting home, picking up the phone. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" We talked for a second, and this was the boss at the place where I was let go. Because I would call from time to time, see how everybody's doing, blah, blah, blah. He rehired me, and I ended up working 3 more years for him, which is very rare. And I'm not trying to make light of layoffs. But having said that, though, I think there are things that you can kind of look at and see the cracks in the wall like that. I didn't see it coming. It was a flourishing company at the particular time, but he wanted to zig when the competition was zagging. And so I won't say that's necessarily a sign of layoffs, but there could be a sign of things that could be beneficial to you. But if your performance was poor, and mine wasn't by any means, but if your performance is poor, you might be the lame duck in the
Yep.
pond, so to speak,
Yep.
because everybody else is going this way and you're not. And in my case, I wasn't there a long time, so of course my sales and my contributions were minuscule to those who were working full time. He wanted a full time staff fully. He didn't want part time. In fact, he let me do part time for a while because of our relationship. But when I came on, I did come on. I didn't even come on necessarily at full time, but I did have a much bigger role, and to the point to where I actually became a manager at one point. But then things happened. But all that to say is that look for company growth, but you also have to kind of look at the language that's kind of around it. Are they maybe talking, growth in spite of you, or that you're in part of the growth and that you've contributed? And sometimes, and I've seen in other companies where I've been, is where they'll talk about an individual or talk about individuals, talk about department. They'll talk about saying that these departments are really growing and spurting growth, but never mention the departments are not doing well. So you can take a sign that some kind of turnover is going to happen. It may not necessarily be a layoff, and sometimes layoffs and firings could be the same thing according to the company. In fact, it's good that you find out what the language is when you leave a company. Okay, just to be clear, when another company calls, what are you telling them? You want to know that bit of intel because for
Mhm.
other companies, there's a big difference between being fired and being laid off. So you want to find out what that language is because, like Sweta said, you can negotiate the terms because nobody wants to be in the other end of a layoff. In fact, most companies these days, if I'm not mistaken, have very neutral language when they talk to employers that call for references. So, but there's some others who will, it gets publicized and it becomes very ugly. We had our example from December where Better.com had decided to fire 900 or lay off 900. And that was something to learn from because, although the presentation was you guys are being laid off, what came out publicly was that a bulk of them were needed to be fired. So that can also bring up something that could be kind of tricky. So you want to find out what that language is when you leave. And then another part of that is if you are, and this again, this is experience and not being laid off, but kind of been in the facility when layoffs were happening, is the fact that they can, um, if something went on with the company, let's say there were some questionable things and the
Mhm.
company knows it. Let's
Mhm.
say they discover behind what happens, or they kind of know but don't want the cat out of the bag. Then they may want to give you a severance, but also to have you sign an agreement that you're not going to say anything to the public or mention it anywhere else. In which that gets a little tricky, but the basic advice is that if you plan to sue, don't take the money, don't
Amen.
take the severance. If you do plan, if you don't plan to say anything, start negotiating and get as much as you possibly can because you have a small upper hand. And there's some argument and said that shouldn't matter. It does matter because it makes it trickier in court, and then might be further scrutiny on your person rather than the company. So you don't want to be that kind of object of desire, or the victim, so to speak. You want to have the upper hand. So those are things you should keep in mind as well. And we can go back around here and talk about some of the things that people can, some ways that people, some other signs, and maybe some further things down the line, like what should be the language that you should use when you're telling an employer and so forth. Sweta?
Yeah, so I'd like to go back a little bit on it. So a lot of people, and I did not know that, right? So when the layoff happens, obviously, like Damon said, like they put the list together, who to do it, what kind of demographic, the race kicks in, the age kicks in. There's a severance calculations as per state, right? These are all
Right.
put it on together on package. Each packages would look different when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
compensation, bonuses, stipend, if you're and it all is dictated by the job offer that you've signed in. And a lot of people, what
Mm-hmm.
they think is, okay, I'm laid off. You know what? This is it. I can't go back and negotiate, right? That's where people go wrong. You don't sign it, you're right, but what are you going to do after, right? Because you're not an expert on it. Have some legal team to look into it. There's a clawback. Maybe you're offered outplacement services, but you would have to take it within the particular time that you're not even healed, you're
Mm-hmm.
not even ready yet, right? You don't
Right.
even know what you want. You're so into the world of why that
Right.
happened to me, and they dictate that timeline. You can extend that. You can even ask for money for that outplacement as well, and go and hire your own personal consultant, right? That's why
Right.
the lawyers are there. And are you treated right? Because the company's job is to make sure that, what they do bare minimum, and they want you to come back. They are expecting out of so many layoff, certain people is going to come back, and they have a budget for it, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
got to go. This is not the money that, what you want to leave on the table. So you want to negotiate those contracts. And
Mm-hmm.
the language does matter as well, right? What does it say? Our role role eliminated or terminated. That matters as well, right? My role
Right.
was eliminated due to restructuring. It was easy for me. But then what happens is I was on the severance for years, whatever. Then, like, technically, I'm still employed with them for so many months, right?
Right.
Technically, it depends on how the severance and bonuses are paid out too. So everything matters. Look at those, take your time. And
Mhm.
then, most of all, a lot of people forget this, is you always have to go back to the job offer they have signed it, because that dictate, that's going to dictate how you're going to negotiate. A lot of companies, let's say right now, why do you think the layoffs are happening during their calendar year where the bonuses are due right after Christmas? Because if you go in January, the money that you made, the bonuses and everything, companies are not legally liable to pay you because you're no longer employed. But then in Canada, the new law kicked in because employers were using as a loophole. But then now, if you're on the severance with them for years, you are technically employed, and your benefit, your bonuses, and everything should be given to you as an employee. So a lot of people
Mhm.
don't know it, right? Maybe it's different based on the job offer you've signed it. So everyone has a different packages. No one gets the same packages. Your age, the time for you to get that title back, how many for VP and executive, it's going to probably take years. For entry level,
Yeah.
you're going to bounce back quickly, and it depends on how many years of services you've done. So everything, including your benefit, RSP, for your 401k, right? So everything matters. So don't sign that. Let it run by legal team and see how you can go back. And you know what? It works the wonder, because it would be so much relief for you when you know that you're treated fairly later on at the end of the day. And you got to calculate it, right? You don't want to hire the lawyer if it doesn't make sense. If paying it has to make sense. So
Yeah.
right now, I want everyone to go back and review your job offer, print it out, put it on your desk, bring it home. Anything could happen. And that's going to be the first thing, employment letter, contract, your lawyer is going to ask you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you can afford a lawyer, not everybody can
And
afford a
there's free
lawyer under
lawyers
those
too.
rules.
Just so you know, in Canada, they're nonprofit as well. They actually take the case for free as well. So go out and see it. And there's a severance calculator as well online. You can see quickly calculate as well based on the province as well.
Yeah, yeah, and to let you know, in some states, and I'm talking particularly about United States, they have bar associations where attorneys can be members of. They offer some free time if you call your local state, like Illinois State Bar Association. And I say that it used to be to where you can call and they can tell you that they have a free Saturday on the second or third week of the month. So timing is also everything, because here in the States, it, they pressure you to sign off as soon as you possibly can, and
Yes.
you've got to avoid that time. You don't have a lot of time very often because they give you a very small window if they do give you time. But a lot of times they are pressuring you to sign off right away because they want to be one and done. Because the more that they have people to come back, it costs them more time and money. So you want to be well aware of that. And that's why probably it's good. And I believe this, as you're taking a job, you should also decide what are your terms are going to be in exiting that job. It's sort of like a good business plan. You decide how you start business, but what are going to be the terms you exit. And that's going to make a big difference. And I think we can go on to a whole nother tangent about that, and I won't. But I think all in all, there needs to be some kind of preparation, especially if you walk in the door and you start to hear somebody being laid off while you are walking in, somebody's walking out. You want to be a little bit curious about it. So I'll let it go at that. But I think that's great info, Swetha. Thank you. Damien, you want to add on to that?
I do. And that is, I have seen incredible things negotiated.
Yeah.
Um, if you ask and you control the process because you have the agreement, the longer you hold on to the agreement, the more uncomfortable the company becomes because you're contrarian. 95% of the people sign it and don't even think about it because they want the severance. not
Right.
knowing that you can negotiate for more severance, your vacation pay if it's not included, classes, out outplacement, all of those things. And in the instance, this person negotiated in her severance the company to pay her lease and pay for her to move back to West Virginia.
Mm.
Uh, but that was a single situation. The person was very angry uh, and basically said, "You brought me down here, you take me back." So just remember that you control the process and it cannot go forward until you make that decision. I absolutely agree about your job description, knowing what that is, knowing what the limits are, if you will. Sometimes they're stated, sometimes they're not. I know at one point a company brought me on and they gave me a boilerplate uh, contract. And I went through and I think I lined out 12 different things and wrote the owner a letter saying, these are the things that I'm not going to sign because, and I gave him reasons for it. And
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't extremely happy, but it's the difference between me owning what I wrote and them owning the copyright for what I wrote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So read your contract or your job description carefully, go in with your eyes open, and just remember, once you get that envelope, you control the process and slow down and definitely get unemotional and a person that's not involved, not emotionally involved, to take a look at your contract. And definitely, in my case, North Carolina did not have. The only thing that they had was legal aid. I didn't qualify for that. I paid to go see a attorney, and
Mm-hmm.
the bottom line is, he said, "Well, I can fight age discrimination at $150 an hour for 8 months. The only thing you're going to lose is the money that you give me because they will not budge an inch." My point being is, I saved myself a tremendous amount of time and energy. It didn't make it any better, but at least I was able to channel my efforts going forward looking to find the next position than being tied up in the past for a position that um, they let me go. Of course, they called a year later and they said, that person who blamed everything on you has lost 75% of our business. We'd really like to have you back. And of course, I said no. So what goes around comes around.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers Live. It is a business and leadership channel that I'm developing, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy this concept and also enjoy this content that we're bringing to you that's going to be really special. I want to bring with me today Magalie Rene. Her company is the Workplace Catalyst, and she is developing compassionate and empathetic leaders. And hopefully, a lot of you will get a lot out of this because a lot of you are contemplating building a business and want to start off on the right foot. So, I want to greet Magalie, as she's recently been on Good Morning America, Glassdoor, Forbes, those kind of channels. So hopefully you'll enjoy this content because this is a little bit different, and this might be um, testosterone, sort of, kind of, in a way, though it shouldn't be, but for a lot of people, it might be. Thank you very much, Magalie, for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Yes, thank you. Um, we were talking before, and the reason why you resonated with me personally, because I'm sort of, my DNA runs along the compassionate empathy line, and I can remember getting reamed by a couple of bosses throughout time that I was compassionate and empathetic. And I think there's a lot of us out there that leave that because that's our gift. It's not something that's considered a weakness, at least for those who at least understand leadership. But for a lot of people, they are very much anti. Compassion and anti empathy. Maybe you might have some insight to why that is, or why people tend to leave that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So the kind of leadership that we need now that's gotten us to this point really isn't going to get us where we're going. It isn't the type of
Mhm.
leadership that's effective,
Mhm.
considering how many circumstances, right? External circumstances, stresses, challenges we're dealing with in this moment in time.
Mhm.
The pandemic, right? Another racial awakening, all of the different stressors, returning to work in this kind of climate, vaccinations, anti-vaccinations. I think we need compassion. We need compassion in leadership. And the reason why it's been a challenge, I think, up to now to have people really accept that and embrace that is because it was looked at as a weakness,
Mhm.
right? If you're vulnerable, if you're connecting to how people feel, if you care, then you're not going to meet your deliverables. Then you're coddling, then you're enabling, you're weak, you're
Mhm.
fragile, right? So I
Mhm.
think that that's been the past thinking, and perhaps some people still haven't quite gotten on board because they're afraid that anything that is softer than the usual hard line leadership is going to lead to a lack of accomplishment and reaching your goals.
Yeah, many employers are asking people to come back into the office, and you know, I think that's one of the things that people ultimately listening are missing. Although many people probably can't put their finger on why there are other circumstances than other than obvious, other than salary or working conditions that that employers are not willing to try to understand and listen with empathy and deploy when they see appropriate or when it's appropriate.
Well, I mean, I think that some people are. So I'm noticing that there are a lot of different ways and approaches to returning to work. Some
Hmm.
employers are making it mandatory to be back in the office. Some employers are being open and are creating a hybrid environment where you can be home, you can be in the office, kind of do both. And I think it depends on the field. And I do think that you have that other group of individuals and of companies who are old school and they are just moving forward very slowly. There are a lot of people, right, in general, and then of course that people make up organizations. So then you've got organizations and companies that are just they're like dinosaurs. They don't understand that there's a remote revolution. This is a new time in our society, and there are ways now that we can work together and have global reach and impact, and it doesn't require we be physically in the office.
Yeah, I really believe that there are some good signs that people who are looking for work, at least, can expect from a leader or people that they come in contact with a company that might have this. Are there specific signs? Let's say somebody is looking for a compassionate leader to either partner with or collaborate with or even work for.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do at Workplace Catalyst, my company, is that we really work with mission-driven organizations and leaders, and we
Hmm.
support them in bridging compassionate leadership, well-being, and belonging. So think of those three areas as they must work together. So when you're looking into either jumping into a new organization or collaborating with other, I don't know, leaders or influencers or anyone, right?
Hmm.
Partnering with them in any capacity. And this goes for personal or professional. You want
Right.
to be thinking about, do they care about your well-being? Are they mindful of their own well-being? Do they come from understanding? Are they coming from curiosity? Or are they judgmental, coming from judgment, right? These are the traits: understanding, empathy, listening. Do they want to hear what you have to say? What kinds of causes might they be passionate about? What kind of interests do they have? Are they thinking about me, this company, this company, this company, this initiative? Are they also linking and thinking about how what they do in any capacity, what you're going to do together, how that's going to impact the world, how that's going to impact other people? So I think those are some of the things we can look at. Do they care about others? Are they listening? Are they understanding? Do they care? And are they interested in what you have to bring to the table and what you have to share?
Yeah, most people are going to have to look a little bit deeper than a mission statement and maybe a couple of statements that are on a website in order to really find out what the true core of that company is, and do they have those particular values.
Absolutely. And it's not only what they're writing and what they're saying, it's also thinking about looking at the makeup of the company. How many, what do the demographics look like? How many people of color? What are they doing when it is Pride Month, right? What are they doing throughout the year to support people, marginalized groups, right? So these are the kinds of questions we need to start asking ourselves. It's not just about what statements they're putting out there. It's also, what does the company stand for? And what do you see historically over time? How have they been engaging around racial inequity, right? These are the kinds of conversations we want to be having.
Yeah, and I would even add, are the leaders involved in that conversation, and are they catalysts for those conversations? Because
Totally. Check them
it's
out
not
on LinkedIn, right? And see
right.
what they're into.
Well, it's not only just important to just to lend on the back end, but to start those conversations. And sometimes, even when it's considered controversial in the industry that they're in, it shouldn't be. But unfortunately, that is the space that we live in right now, where if somebody is a little bit compassionate, somebody's empathetic, or if a company deploys those, like let's say Ben and Jerry's, who is deeply involved in being compassionate, being empathetic, and are very vocal and somewhat bold about it, you would have to it's almost be attracted to those kind of characteristics than the ones that are profiting, say they'll advance your career. Because really, if you're being those things, you'll attract other people that will be like-minded, and you'll advance in those areas.
That's true. I also think that there's a spectrum, right? So not everybody's going to be, Ben and Jerry's isn't just compassionate, they're also progressive. So they're
Yes.
very vocal politically. And I don't necessarily know that every company has to be as politically active and vocal. Different organizations in different industries are going to work different ways. So we got to think about, there is a spectrum. However,
Yeah.
you can, even if a company or an organization isn't as progressive, you can still be thinking about, what are their leaders interested in? What are they talking about? What are some of the topics that they have their thought leaders are involved in sharing and discussing? And I think you can find that out by doing a deeper dive on the leadership. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Great point. There are triggers as well for those who work in organizations and those who want to work or build an organization where they may not know exactly what they are feeling, but it runs along the line because of the lack of compassion and empathy. I think for me, what was a trigger, well, I couldn't figure out what it was, but I was being told something that was totally against what was in nature for me, that it is better for me to lead with beating my chest than to, you know what I mean, as
Toxic.
far as
I'm hearing like toxic
doing it together.
masculinity, right? Like
Well,
being
that's the kind
very,
of thing. Well,
yeah.
my age group, unfortunately, has been exposed to more of that than having the compassion, empathetic part of it. I know there are people who have been triggered by that. What are some of the common ones that you've run across where it causes people to hold back and to doubt themselves and to maybe even somewhat self-sabotage their efforts if they aspire to those things?
Yeah, so I often think about, everything is either coming from love or fear. So where are we operating from? When we're operating from love, then we are expansive, we're energized, we're excited about what we're creating. When we're operating from fear, that really is where you have these ideas and feelings of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I've got to show up a certain way to impress other people, right? I've got to fall in line with what the status quo is. So if compassion or empathy or speaking up feels uncomfortable, maybe that's because you want to toe the line. You want to fit in with whatever that environment is. Those are the characteristics that come from fear, being afraid to show up as our authentic selves. So I often say we've got to redefine and redesign our relationship with fear. So using fear, instead of allowing it to keep you constricted and small and fitting in a box, right? Use the fear as a catalyst to do something different, to step outside of your comfort zone, and get excited about being uncomfortable, get excited about being afraid, because that means it's an opportunity for your next level, right? For your next level of leadership. And it is going to require that you do something different, that you do something new, that you stretch out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think a lot of people aren't particularly afraid of conflict with others. That is conflict with what they grew up with, and perhaps they even think of their grandmothers, their mothers, their fathers, the things that were handed down to them were completely against what we are talking about. So there's that internal conflict with the ghost, so to speak. You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
think
mean?
that's powerful. I'm hearing like mastering yourself and understanding your trigger points. Like, what is it that might be influencing you, and why might you be triggered in a situation? Is that what you mean, Mark?
Yes, and I think it's not even with coworkers or with your boss or with people collaborating business partners. It could be your past, the things that you were told as a man coming up, or what your mother had passed down. Because a lot of these attributes are not just masculine; they're also passed by women because that's how they grew up, and they're just passing it on to you because they think that's the way a man's supposed to be. That there's that conflict, not so much with the external, it's
It's the
deeply internal.
internal.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the internal. So so we're doing work with a global advertising agency, and we're working specifically on Black leaders and Black talent, and talking to them, connecting the dots, right, between their leadership styles and history and their backgrounds and the way that we come up is really everything you're talking about. And really, when it comes to compassionate leadership, you really can't show up fully in your leadership if you're not aware of your triggers and aware of what you've been through and how that may be influencing the way you engage with other people. So it is really internal. And from there, then it kind of goes external. And there are a lot of negative messages, right? As people of color that we have, as Black people that we have taken in. And that is from the external, but a lot of times that's internalized. So one of the things I practice so deeply is take nothing personally, because it's never about me. So the way someone is reacting and acting has nothing to do with me. How they even see me is more a reflection on who they are, what they believe, and what triggers they're having, more than it is about who I am or how I'm showing up. So that's one of the key things, is just recognizing that. Notice your triggers. Notice what you believed and why it has you so angry. Get to the bottom of it before you're reacting. And also remember that people's opinions of you and the way that they show up, even in their triggers, has nothing to do with you. And that will allow you to get to that baseline of like neutrality, where you calm yourself down, and then you can think more clearly and take action that's effective rather than reactive.
Yeah. The other half of the internal conflict is just that they would also have to reconcile who their past relationships who've fed them that information, who they really were. And I think that's even harder to accept, the fact that they are or not as compassionate, they're not as empathetic, and they see the damage that was done, but they also have to reconcile that's the kind of damage that their past relationships, whether it's been family or business partners, those particular ghosts, how they were. And that's something that they can't change, except they're afraid to change the narrative around those people that fed them that kind of those traits. You understand
Mark,
what I
I
mean?
love it. You're going so deep. We're
I
going
know.
deep this morning. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. 100%. I think we've got to look. I always say we're always practicing something. We're always practicing something. So what are the traits? What are the behaviors that have gotten us this far, right?
Mhm.
What have you been taught? By whom? What did their life look like? How did that person, your grandmother, your mother, your granddad, your dad, your aunts, uncles, whoever it is, or maybe it's a past boss, what kind of relationships did they have? When you look at their life, were they
Mhm.
happy? Was
Yeah.
it creating, was what they taught you, was that
Mhm.
creating love for them in their life, right?
Yeah.
Positivity, or was
Yeah.
it exhausting, depleting, negative? I had a boss once, and when I would tell people, when I first started at a particular job, I would tell people, oh, I work for so and so. They, across the board, doesn't matter what department, division they were in, they'd go, I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
How has it been?
Mhm.
I know that must be difficult. Like, if
Right.
that's the kind of response that this person is getting, maybe somebody in your past that has taught you or was a mentor. I don't know. I mean, I'm making up all kinds of scenarios here.
Right.
But, if that's the kind of response they're getting, then maybe you need to rethink what you've been taught and reassess how you're going to show up.
Or they will refuse to comment at all, because they're also conflicted between what they were taught as to what May is supposed to be and what they're trying to do outside of that. So instead of dealing with that conflict, that's just one more to add. They rather not deal with that at all.
Yeah. Agreed.
So yeah. So for you, and for leaders particular, um, is there one particular teachable moment that people probably can take away from having the right kind of dialogue? Let's say that they do come, they're able to reconcile some of the ghosts from the past. So let's call it that.
Okay.
That they're able to go, but they're not sure what is the first step to take, or the first couple of steps to take. What would you recommend?
I would recommend personal development of any sort. So that can be through particular programs that you might take. It might be through reading certain books. There are two books that really had an impact on me, and those are great ways and places to start. One is called You Can Heal Your Life, and it's
Hmm.
by Louise Hay, who's a woman who did personal development and self-help since the 80s, right?
Hmm.
And she's no longer alive, but her book is really transcendent. It's really supported me. Another one is The Four Agreements, which is an excellent, excellent, excellent book. I think we've got to be focused on self-mastery, because you cannot support others, show up in your utmost power at the highest levels of the way you're engaging in your leadership. You can't show up that way if you haven't gotten good with you. If you haven't taken the time to really do the deep work to look at what has influenced who you've become and how you engage out there in the world, you're not going to be able to be at the highest level to really elevate other people and to make a difference and an impact in the world. So start with you would be the first piece of advice. And then the next is, this is a simple one, but it's also, it blows people's minds because it's so simple. You ready for it,
Hmm.
Mark?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. It's use your breath. There is so much power in the breath. We
Hmm.
have a power to pause at any moment and recalibrate ourselves. And all we need to
Hmm.
do is take a significantly deep, full breath in, hold it at the top for a count of 4 to 7, and then slowly let it out. You do that 3 times, it resets it scientifically resets you, right?
Hmm.
Recalibrates you. You're going to feel completely different, and you can show up in a new moment, because every moment is a new moment, a new opportunity to show up in your most elevated and your best light.
Oh, that's good advice. And I believe there'll be people practicing that as we speak. And
I
they'll
hope
hear this.
so. Take that deep breath in. So much
Yeah.
power in that.
Yes. Anything you'd like to add before I send you off into the internet abyss?
Sure, the abyss. I love it. Sure. You can definitely find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. It's Magalie_Rene. And please do jump into my website and sign up for our newsletter, the Get Conscious newsletter. It's amazing. We have great content that we share. So it's MAGALIERENE.com. And I can't wait to engage with you on the interwebs.
Oh, well, right here, I have it right here on where people can see it. It's been up for the last 15 minutes, so they've had plenty
Oh,
of time to
beautiful. Great.
I want to be sure to get that in. Thank you so much for your time and your great energy. I love it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. It was wonderful to be here with you. I'm glad we got to, this is as in person as it gets right now. So thank you so much.
Right. And somebody had a comment, Elaine, who practically joins me on everything that I do here lately. She said, love the idea of taking a breath will help prevent you from saying something you might otherwise regret. That
Absolutely.
is a fact. Absolutely. And I don't know how many times I've had to breathe where people think it might be a little strange to do so, but it may feel that way socially, but it's for you. It's not for anybody else.
Yep.
So great. Thank you. And I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to